show you the flight command cell. Should be coming up in a moment, with scarcely more than 16 minutes left. All parameters are still strictly nominal, and this means that the members of the flight command cell, headed by Jacques Rossignol, Arianespace Chief Operating Officer, and he's in camera now, have only to watch and wait. They only become directly involved in the proceedings if a major decision. And we have some news here.
Yes, on June the 7th of this year, Antonio Rodota, Director General of the European Space Agency, and Jean-Marie Luton, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Arianespace, signed the largest ever launch contract in the history of the European space industry. This contract covers 9 Ariane 5 launchers for an amount exceeding 1 billion euros. And these will place 9 automated transfer vehicles into orbit to resupply the space station.
Well, the next pictures show the first and third stages for the 100th Ariane 4 in course of assembly at Les Mureaux in France. A notable event in a long and fruitful career, by no means over yet. A further 16 launches are in production, and as tonight's launch is the 97th with Ariane 4, we shall witness another 19 liftoffs with the various versions of this launcher over the next 2 years. The ceremony marking the achievement was almost simultaneous with the celebration of the 20th anniversary of Arianespace.
ARTA is an ESA Ariane 5 technology support program whose purpose is to ensure the continued high quality of Ariane 5 in terms of reliability and performance. Modifications to the launcher are qualified using facilities such as the solid booster test stand seen in this sequence. This facility was recently used to test enhancements to the Ariane 5 booster solid rocket motor.
And a new face on the Arianespace scene. Leo Mondale was recently appointed president of Arianespace Inc., the Washington, D.C.-based Arianespace U.S. marketing affiliate. This is a key post, as more than 1/4 of the launch contracts signed by Arianespace have been with U.S. or North American customers, while over 50% of contracts involve U.S.-built spacecraft.
And then here we see the Soyuz Fregat launcher on the pad in Baikonur just before placing the 3rd and 4th cluster satellites into orbit for ESA. Soyuz commercial launch services are provided by Starsem, a Franco-Russian joint venture also involving Arianespace. Cluster 3 and 4 will join the other 2 cluster satellites launched a few weeks back. This mini constellation will provide scientists with 3D data on solar weather.
Back into real time as we return to mission control. And we're going to meet here Patrick Loire, Arianespace payload manager for Flight 131 and mission manager for the Nilesat 102 launch contract. Salah Hamza, Nilesat program director. And coming up in a moment, we shall no doubt see Philippe Roussel of Astrium, head of the engineering division of TC Satellites. He must be around there somewhere, and here he is. Everyone is still looking reasonably relaxed, but with more than, not much more than 12 minutes to lift off, tension is clearly building up.
Yes, the Nilesat preparation campaign lasted 5 weeks, and we shall see some highlights here.
Built by the Astrium company, the European leader of the commercial satellites, Nilesat 102 is arrived in French Guiana the 11th of July. It has been immediately installed in the PCU area of the CSG, where it has been submitted to an overall check of all its subsystems. These tests have been successfully completed up to the 21st of July, and then the satellite has been moved to the ELA area. Installed in the assembly hall of the S3A, a complete fit check with the Ariane 4 adapter has been performed, including the verification of the mechanical and electrical interfaces. Then, the mechanical properties have been measured just before the propellant loading, with first the NTO the 21st of July, and with the hydrazine the 1st of August. Nilesat 102 has been then transferred in the S3B buildings, where it has been encapsulated within the Minispelda in the lower position, just under Brasilsat before the 9th of August.
Nilesat 102 will join Nilesat 101, already in orbit and also launched on Ariane. This makes Nilesat the second 100% Ariane launch customer of the evening. The spacecraft will be placed into autonomous transfer orbit 2 minutes after separation from the Spelder structure. And here in Jupiter, we now see Minister Sawat al-Sharif, the Egyptian Minister for Information, and we shall shortly be seeing Pierre de Beza of Alcatel, which has provided the Nilesat payload, Jean-Jacques Gauthier, Chief Financial Officer of Astrium. I'm presenting them before we see them. Here we are, because we've been seeing people in rather disorder this evening. Other members of the Nilesat team are in Jupiter Mission Control and in the S1A building.
Yes, we'll have a final.
Well, noisy but nice, you might say. Anyway, Charlotte, what was the verdict on the weather situation?
Well, the news, happily, Simon, is very, very good. It's green for the entire launch window, and so it continues to look very, very good for the liftoff.
Always good to hear. Well, we've seen the launcher assembly process roll out of the launcher 1 kilometer up the rail track to the pad. We've seen preparation of the two spacecraft and their encapsulation inside the fairing and the Spelder. What we've not seen is integration of the upper composite with the launcher, and we're now going to put that right. Another peep in the CDL. Philippe Ers looking fairly happy.
Yep, excuse me. The upper composite containing Brasilsat and Nilesat was transferred to the pad just 1 week ago. This operation, positioning inside the gantry, hoisting to the payload platform and mating with the launcher, were completed in 48 hours. The two passengers were maintained under the same controlled environmental conditions during the complete process, and this situation naturally continues.
And we're now nearing the end of a count lasting 14 hours. So why so long, Charlotte?
Well, it's less a question of precise timing than of ensuring that each task is executed correctly and in the right order. As regards timing, a number of margins are built in to take care of any problems which might arise without compromising liftoff, right at the start of the window.
And we're coming up to the
À
synchronized
tous de les Néo,
sequence,
attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée.
and we'll explain later.
Top H0 moins 6 minutes.
Right, well, we're now inside the synchronized sequence and counting, and control of the launcher has been taken out of the hands of the human operators in the Launch Control Center and handed over to two powerful ground computers. More explanations in a minute after our last piece of film, shot only 5 hours back, showing gantry rollback.
The gantry protects the launcher and provides access to all levels for final preparation tasks, including integration of the payload composite. While this work has been completed, it takes in real time not the few seconds you will see in this clip, but a full hour to shift this huge structure, 98 meters high and weighing almost 4,000 tons, a distance of only 80 meters.
And that, as we say, was just about 5.5 hours back. Handover of control to the two computers is the occasion for relief on the part of CDL personnel, and the reason for this is very clear. During this final phase of the count, there's such a huge increase in the mass of data to be collected, sorted, processed, and above all checked, and the number of command signals to be generated and transmitted is so great that the situation could not be handled in any other way in so short a time. So let's see what actually happens.
So as you were saying, the control function is switched to the two computers. Each computer has its own specific set of tasks, and all resources used in the launch system are synchronized on a common final countdown sequence, which explains the name.
And we've just had the launch time loaded in the onboard computer.
That's right. One computer places the fluid and propellant systems in flight configuration and performs the corresponding checkout routines, and the other carries out similar tasks for the preparation of the electrical systems. This includes initiation of the flight program, startup of servo motors, switchover from ground to onboard power, and so on.
And we have in camera now Amin Bassouni, chairman of Nilesat.
Right.
And if a status panel goes from green to red for any reason inside the synchronized sequence, the count returns, of course, to -6 minutes. The launcher is reconfigured in the safety state, and we go on hold. With the computers in charge, you may think that Philippe Herse and his team in the Launch Control Center have nothing left to do and can sit back and relax, but that's quite wrong. They still have a key monitoring task and, in an extreme case, a control override function. And as for relaxing, no, the word is stress.
Right, the spacecraft has now switched to onboard power. And as you were mentioning monitoring, a similar monitoring function is provided by the project room at Ariane headquarters near Paris, France. This is a sort of miniature CDL staffed by experts who can provide specific advice in case of need.
And all ground support facilities are now on full alert. The status panel greens confirm this, and this includes the tracking stations in particular, a speciality of yours, Charlotte.
Yes, a little over 2 hours ago, the complete tracking facility, including all downrange stations, conducted a dry run using data from a previous Ariane flight. So we are sure that they are fully prepared for liftoff.
And this obviously applies also to the satellite ground stations. Where are these located?
Well, Dan Mogo in Indonesia is scheduled to pick up Brasilsat 40 minutes after separation. And Nilesat will be picked up by the Gnangara station in Australia 25 minutes after separation.
And now I look at the cryogenic arms.
Yes, we're going to zoom in on the cryogenic fueling arms, still coupled to the third stage valve plates. Their fuel task has been completed, but the arms still provide a stabilizing function. Two cameras produce this squashed launcher image, which you see here. And we'll see this picture again when the arms open 5 seconds before first stage ignition.
2 minutes to go, less than 2 minutes to go. Tension mounts in mission control, the CDL, the tracking and telemetry stations, all of which are, of course, on full alert, and indeed here in the commentary boxes.
Yes, and a reminder for late arrivals, you're just in time to watch the liftoff of Ariane Flight 131 with Brasilsat and Nilesat on board.
The launcher is ready, and the initial Local tracking stations are already locked onto the large, momentarily stationary object. The satellite passengers are itching to get into orbit. The status panel is still steady on green. We have a reasonable window, but hands are getting just a little bit fidgety now. And we come up to the last 60 seconds of negative count.
Right, the launcher is now on onboard power.
And we have less than 60 seconds to go. So to all members of the two spacecraft teams, wherever you are, good luck, good launch, good orbit.
So now the first stage servo motors are armed.
The inertial guidance gyros will be released at -9 seconds. The cryogenic arms will open at -5 seconds. First stage ignition will occur at time t. The solid boosters will be ignited, the launch table clamps will open, and Ariane will lift off at +4.4 seconds and will leave the rest of it to the DDO.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
We have ignition
Allumage,
and liftoff.
décollage. Tous les paramètres de propulsion sont normaux.
A beautiful picture in a clear sky with a steady burn from those 4 Viking engines of the first stage.
Extinction des propulseurs d'appoint à poudre.
And we
Trajectoire
already
normale.
have burnout of the solid propellant boosters.
Yes, they will separate in about 20 seconds.
We really do have a clear view here.
Fabulous.
We're well past the tilt operation. And we are already just over 1 minute into mission.
Ah, there they go.
And there is the separation of the
Séparation des propulseurs d'appoint à poudre.
2 solid propellant boosters.
Now we can hear the noise as well.
Indeed. We can certainly hear the noise as Ariane is almost on the vertical of the Jupiter building. We also have a bit of vibration, and I think most of you can probably hear that too.
So
we already have the
Tous les
trajectory
paramètres de
plot
propulsion sont
on our
normaux et
screen.
la trajectoire est nominale.
And Charlotte, I think this is a good moment to give a clear description of this display.
yes, as you can see on your left-hand side of the screen, you see the planned trajectory of the launcher, and you see a little circle and a cross, which denotes the actual position of the launcher at this moment. On your right side, you see the time from
Propulsion
liftoff,
normale.
121 seconds. You also see the means the tracking station used to provide the
Trajectoire
data
nominale.
to the computer. In this case, we're looking at one of the inertial platforms, and we see the altitude is 32 degrees, and the velocity is now 1.13 kilometers per second.
And we're coming up to separation of the liquid propellant boosters. And
Extinction des propulseurs d'appoint liquide.
as announced by the DDO, it's his voice that you keep
Séparation des
hearing.
propulseurs d'appoint liquide.
And we have separation of the liquid propellant boosters.
That's
We'll
right.
explain where the DDO gets all his information from a little later on in the program.
The image you see on your screen is an image taken from the Cénité d'Olite on Île Royale, one of the Îles du Salut, just off the coast here from Kourou. And I must say, it's a very, very clear sky tonight.
It's marvelous.
Yes.
Altitude 55 kilometers, and we're still, we can see it really beautifully.
Yes.
Our next separation will be that of the first stage from the second, coming up in 30-40 seconds from now.
Yes, that's right.
And we are we're approaching 70 kilometers altitude, and we have already got over a quarter of the way to our target orbit injection velocity of 9.7 kilometers per second.
Extinction du premier étage.
burnout of the first stage.
Okay. It's interesting to note that the first stage burns basically until the fuel is exhausted, and the drop in the nominal thrust is then detected by the onboard computer, which initiates the separation
Séparation premier
sequence.
étage.
And this is what has just taken place.
Et allumage deuxième.
And ignition of the second stage.
Yes, that's right.
And we're coming very close now to separation or release of the fairing, which has protected the upper satellite during the atmospheric flight phase. And during this time, the pressure inside the fairing has been equalized with the external pressure so as to avoid a sort of boom effect on release of the fairing.
And here we'll now have separation of the coiffe.
Séparation coiffe. Tous les paramètres propulsifs sont nominaux.
Right.
And we have a reassuring announcement from the DDO. He's been saying that regularly so far, that we have an entirely nominal situation on board the launcher.
Yes. So now what remains is the second stage and the third stage, plus the two satellites.
And we'll take a time
Tous les
check.
paramètres de propulsion sont nominaux.
Almost exactly, here we go for 5 minutes. Intermission, altitude 136 kilometers, launcher velocity 4.3 kilometers per second. Another process that has been going on all the way through since liftoff has been chill down of the cryogenic pipework and valves, which will feed liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen from the tanks in the third stage to the combustion chamber. This is somewhat similar to the chilling process required to actually fill the tanks when the launcher is still on the ground. And we approach stage 2
Extinction du deuxième étage.
shutdown.
Yes, the second stage.
Séparation deuxième, troisième étage. Et allumage du troisième étage.
And we have ignition of the third stage. That is
Les
always a very
paramètres de
good one to hear.
propulsion sont nominaux.
Yes, I was just going to mention that the extinction of the second stage is also an operation commanded by the onboard computer based on reaching a certain velocity increment.
Have we explained the actual separation process?
Well, the interstage separation occurs at periods of virtually zero acceleration, and a pyrotechnic device is used to cut the connection between the two stages, and separation is then achieved in less than about 1 millisecond. The two stages are forced apart by the activation of retro rockets on the lower spent stage, and then accelerator rockets on the upper stage are fired. And the purpose of this is twofold. One is
Acquisition par la station de Natal.
And we have the first acquisition by the first downrange
Il
tracking
reste
station,
12 minutes de propulsion, troisième étage.
Natal in Brazil, and we have 12 minutes of burn time with the third stage in front of us.
That's right. I was just going to mention that the accelerator rockets also serve to make sure that the fuel gathers at the bottom of the tank and thus flows correctly to the
Tous les
engine.
paramètres de propulsion sont nominaux.
And in about 2 minutes, we shall be out of visibility of Kourou.
Trajectoire normale.
There is an overlap between each successive downrange station and its predecessor, but these overlaps tend to decrease in time as we move further out over the Atlantic.
Yes, but there's usually at least about a minute or a minute and a half in between so that we are sure we will not lose any data. And it's, of course, vitally important that we collect all the data coming down from the launcher.
Anyway, as we said earlier, we'd explain how the DDO gets his information, the information which he passes on to us. And I also mentioned that launcher tracking was your speciality, Charlotte. Would you like to just say
Propulsion et
a few well-chosen
trajectoire
words?
Well, yes, I spent 3 years here as working as a tracking operator. So my favorite place is down in the control center, in the control room that we see here below. But the tracking system is fairly advanced. We rely on data coming from the 3 radar stations here in French Guiana, and then the telemetry station, of course. And then we have telemetry tracking stations along the route. They collect roughly 600 parameters or so, which are downlinked from the launcher and which are then transmitted by telecom facilities.
Well, one point there is that has always intrigued me. Why do we have radar and telemetry tracking for a start, and then as from Natal onwards, we're just down to telemetry? Why no more radar?
Well, basically, the information we get from the launcher is sufficiently precise. And so the radar stations that we used to dispose in Natal in Brazil are no longer really required for our purposes. And therefore, we now maintain only the telemetry
Les paramètres de
station
propulsion sont nominaux.
Once again, everything on board is strictly nominal. So how, in fact, does the data get down from the launcher A to the DDO, and for that matter, onto the trajectory plot?
Well, as mentioned before, the data is collected by the telemetry stations and is sent to Kourou by the means of regular telecommunication networks. The data is then processed by the two computers, TR1 and TR2, which each of them selects a different source of information to ensure that we have two independent sources. And like we mentioned earlier, there's about 600 parameters which are downlinked from the Ariane. And apart from the position and velocity, which is treated by the computer, there's also a subset of maybe 60, 70 parameters which are transmitted and which are shown in real time at a computer in the telemetry center here. And there's an Ariane Espace representative there who does a quick analysis in real time and informs the DDO about the major events.
And we just have loss of signal by the Kourou tracking stations. So coming back to our flight data, there is a huge volume that is being beamed down. And how is this in fact used apart from immediate information?
Well, all of the data
Propulsion tout à fait normale.
is subjected to a rigorous post-launch analysis by Ariane Espace. The purpose is, of course, to detect any potential anomaly or discrepancy as compared to the nominal performance. And the analysis is completed in good time before the authorization of the next launch.
Right. Well, for that matter, the satellites must also dialogue
Culmination du troisième étage.
with their... The satellites must also dialogue with their ground stations throughout their in-orbit life.
Yes, you have
Trajectoire et propulsion nominaux.
satellite control stations, and their purpose is to monitor the downlink telemetry, to judge the health of the satellite, and to perform any adjustments if necessary. And it might also be required to adjust the position, either the orbital position to change the area covered by the footprint, or in some cases, like in a network as in Brazil, where you have several satellites, in case you have one dropping out, you might need to move the remaining satellites in order to maintain your complete coverage.
So that's what the satellites talk about when they're dialoguing with the ground stations.
Yes.
So let us turn to
Trajectoire nominale.
one of our customers with a further announcement that the trajectory is fully nominal. Astrium. It's only fitting that we take this opportunity to welcome
Il reste 7 minutes de propulsion.
recently formed joint venture, Astrium, on its first appearance in Kourou as both satellite manufacturer, customer, and Ariane Espace industrial partner. No doubt this will be the first in a long line of Astrium launches.
Acquisition par la station d'Ascension.
And we have the launcher signal picked up by Ascension Island in more or less mid-Atlantic.
That's right. Well, yes, Astrium is a newly formed company, but it's composed of companies who have been in the business for a very, very long time, such as Aerospatiale Matra and BAE Systems in the UK and Daimler
Trajectoire
Chrysler
nominale.
Aerospace in Germany. The Astrium activities cover a very wide area, such as science missions, Earth observation, telecommunication, and ground systems, launchers and orbit infrastructure. And you saw some
Paramètres
images
propulsifs nominaux.
in the film showed earlier by video
Il reste 6
transmission.
minutes de propulsion.
As an example, the company has acted as prime contractor for more than 50 communication satellites, and it has also been prime for ERS, Spot, Envisat, and Meteop. And Envisat, incidentally, is supposed to be launched from here with an Ariane 5 launcher in the not too distant future. And Astrium is, of course, also involved in the Ariane project, producing the second stage, the VEB, the Spectre,
Paramètres de propulsion
etc.
nominaux.
and for that matter, the little Eurocot small launcher project, which is part of the Ariane launcher range extension program. A final word perhaps here is to just advise you that we shall be hearing a recorded interview with Armand Carlier, Chairman and CEO of Astrium, towards the end of the program, just before Nilesat 102 separation.
5 minutes de propulsion.
And we have 5 minutes burn time left with stage 3.
Right.
So the other passenger, Embratel, Hughes. We must also congratulate both Embratel and Hughes Space and Communications from really an entirely different angle from Astrium. Embratel is here for its 6th launch out of 6. Well, I personally have lost a count of
Fin normal de visibilité par la station de Natal.
how many Hughes satellites have been placed into orbit on Ariane launchers, and we have just had loss of signal by Natal.
Well, incidentally, this is perfectly normal. It's at the end of their visibility. Yes, as you were mentioning, Embratel, thanks to its satellite network, today distributes more than 100 TV channels across the country and provides a range of other telecom services. So it's a good customer.
Paramètres de propulsion nominaux. Il reste 4 minutes de propulsion.
4 minutes burn time left with stage 3. Everything is strictly nominal on board. And we shall, in fact, also hear some well-chosen words from Amancio Bolcherio, General Manager of the Embratel Satellite Division, just before Brasilsat B4 separation. So going back for a moment to the news items we showed you earlier in the program before liftoff. One of these was the ATV launch contract. Topical, in view of the ongoing progress with the International Space Station, the way things are going, the ATVs will be in demand, I think, Charlotte, pretty soon for food for hungry ISS crew members and so on.
Well, yes, I mean, we're putting up the first permanent crew sometime in October, November this year. And the ATV, which will act as a resupply vehicle, will be ready for launch sometime in 2004. It's going to weigh roughly 20 tons.
Il reste 3 minutes de propulsion.
And we will launch it by Ariane 5 from Kourou. And for this purpose, we will use a evolution of the Ariane 5, the so-called Versatile, which features a maneuverable upper stage. And
La trajectoire est nominale.
after launch, the ATV will transport itself or fly itself towards the station, and there it will conduct a rendezvous before docking with the Russian module Zvezda.
Well, in fact, the ATV contract is both a stimulus and a reward for the ambitious set of Ariane 5 enhancement programs which have been continued unabated during the recent extended pause in launch operations. And this also applies to work on ground facility improvements for other upcoming Ariane 5 versions, such as the cryogenic upper
Il
stage
reste 2 minutes de propulsion.
ESC-A, and we have 2 minutes left of burn time.
Well, yes, it's a high priority to enhance the dual launch capacity into geostationary orbit using the Ariane 5.
Trajectoire nominale.
We will achieve 6.5 tons this year, and there will be a reignitable upper stage available in 2001. And with the cryogenic upper stage that Simon just mentioned,
Propulsion nominale.
we should have a capacity of launching 9 to 10 tons into geostationary orbit by 2002. And if all goes well, maybe 11 and 12 tons in 2005.
Well, coming back, not exactly to Earth, the trajectory plot shows us an altitude of 253 kilometers. We're on the upturn again after the dip, which you see on the screen now. And we are coming up very, very close to
Il reste 1 minute de propulsion.
shutdown,
Yeah,
1 minute
1 minute to
precisely,
go.
until shutdown of the third stage.
Acquisition par la station de Libreville.
And we have the signal picked up, the launcher signal picked up by Libreville tracking
So,
station.
yes, the third stage will be shut down when the orbital injection point has
Trajectoire
been
nominale.
reached.
Propulsion nominale.
And a word of explanation, shutdown, not burnout. There's a strong distinction there, Charlotte.
Yes, absolutely, because we maintain a certain margin in order to be
Il
able
reste 30
to
secondes de propulsion.
reach the envisaged injection point with a high degree of reliability, and therefore the engine cutoff is commanded by the onboard computer. And we're approaching it right now.
Very, very close, a matter of seconds.
Extinction du troisième étage.
And there we have the extinction of the third stage.
This is Monsieur Porcario, who would like to say a belated word of welcome to all our guests and other visitors who come to Kourou to attend the launch of another Brazilian satellite. As the name indicates, B4 is the fourth of the Embratel second-generation satellites. Embratel satellites have played a major role in the telecommunications domain in Brazil. They've made it possible to set up television networks at national level
Les manœuvres d'orientation se poursuivent
and
normalement.
establish telephone links with the remotest towns and villages of Amazonia. Our satellites have also played their part in the field of business data communications, meeting the needs of the major Brazilian companies to extend their networks nationwide. Brasilsat B4 differs from its predecessors as a result of the privatization of Embratel. We've been able to restructure the product so that B4 will now serve practically the whole of South America, from Venezuela to the southern part of Argentina and Chile.
Bom, e vamos agora torcer.
Our hopes are consequently high for a successful future for Brasilsat B4. Thank you for your attention.
So we just have a few minutes, less than 2 minutes to go before the separation of Brasilsat.
We are in a spin-up situation here.
Not quite yet. We're in the orientation phase. The third stage is equipped with a complete attitude and control system, precisely for the reason that it has to place the satellite into orbit at a correct attitude. And to power the system, we use the remains of the hydrogen. And so the sequence is to spin up what remains of the launcher, the third stage, and the 2 satellites plus the Spelda, and spin up to roughly 30 degrees per second.
And we are seconds from separation of Brasilsat B4.
Séparation Brasilsat B4.
The relief, we have the announcement. We have separated our first of the 2 passengers on tonight's flight.
That's right.
By a separation procedure somewhat radically different, in fact, from the previous separations we've had. The satellite is secured to its payload adapter by a clamping system. The clamping system is cut pyrotechnically at the right moment, and a set of springs just gently nudge the satellite off into autonomous orbit. And the same procedure is used for both satellites and for the Spelda separation, which we shall have in just about 2.5 minutes from now.
Acquisition par la station de Malindi.
And our final downrange tracking station, Malindi, has just picked up what remains of the launcher, the signal from the third stage.
Yes, so the next event will be the separation of the Spelda at 1448 seconds, roughly.
And we shall be hearing in a moment from Armand Carlier, Chairman and CEO of Astrium, just before separation of Nilesat 102. In the meantime, post-separation events for Brasilsat.
Well, as mentioned previously, it will be acquired by the first tracking station in Indonesia in about 40 minutes from now.
And we shall have the satellite will take approximately 3 weeks to adjust its orbit onto its final orbital position. And
Poursuite des manœuvres d'orientation normale.
testing and will be completed, and the satellite will be commissioned in about 6 weeks. And here is Armand Callier. Nilesat is a major player in the satellite operations domain in the Middle East. Previously, there was just Arabsat, but now there are clearly two main centers of excellence. Nilesat has already achieved a brilliant commercial success with the first of its satellites, Nilesat 101, which we supplied to this customer. The second satellite has also got off to a good start, with contracts already signed with Arab Emirates and Lebanese television programs and for internet traffic. Nilesat is a global player, not merely a transponder operator. And in this context, I'd like to pay tribute to Egyptian Minister Safwat al-Sharif for his vision in setting up a free zone in Cairo. This will enable the television stations to extend their activities, thus substantially amplifying the role of Egypt in the realm of satellite TV. Clearly, we anticipate Astrium expansion in this part of the world in our major areas of business activity. In the telecommunications field, we have high hopes of selling more satellites, and high hopes also of continuing to be the chosen supplier of Nilesat. I believe, in fact, that we can already see some early signs of a future Nilesat 103. In the Earth observation domain too, we're engaged in discussions with Egypt for the supply of a dedicated satellite for this application. And I believe that a regional power such as Egypt has every reason to acquire an Earth observation system, for which we're submitting a joint tender with our friends at Alcatel. While that was
Yes.
going on, we had the separation of the Spelder, as you were about to say, Charlotte.
That's right. So now we have one more major event, which is the separation of Nilesat. And
Manœuvres d'orientation se poursuivent normalement.
We have about half a minute to go.
And following that, we will do an avoidance maneuver of the third stage, because our mission of the launcher is not quite finished, even after
Fin
separating.
de la manœuvre d'orientation.
Right. Avoidance is one thing, passivation is the other. Now, what exactly does that entail?
Passivation means opening the valves and draining the remaining fuel in order to make the third stage a completely inert body, which does not pose a risk to any other object.
Which, in fact, is a current preoccupation in space circles.
Mise en rotation.
Yes, the amount of debris which is currently flying around is absolutely incredible, and there are thousands of objects being tracked worldwide. It's actually a big problem for the station, because it has to have shields to protect it against debris.
And we are seconds from separation of our second passenger.
Séparation Nilesat 102.
And there we have it.
I like the patience of our friends in camera now, waiting for that wonderful moment for them. So we have completed the two satellite orbit injections, and as we just said, we have 2 or 3 minutes to go to end of mission for the launcher, but we can really get the cigars out now.
Not everyone smokes, you know. I think smoking is becoming a
This is
minority habit.
100% smoke-free launch, perhaps.
Shall we say a few words about the flexibility of Ariane Espace?
Very quickly, and then we'll just tie it up with what is already starting to happen for the next launch.
Well, basically, we need about 3 weeks between 2 consecutive Ariane 4 launches, but we can put an Ariane 5 in between.
0.
And we have a replay.
Allumage. Décollage. Tous les paramètres de propulsion sont normaux. Allumage. Décollage. Tous les paramètres de propulsion sont normaux.
Well, that was 2 for the price of 1 with our replays, and maybe we've got another one coming up yet. Would you like to explain that, Charlotte, if you can?
I think it might have something to do with a typical satellite launcher campaign.
I think you're almost certainly right. Coming back to the question of what happens next, indeed, the gap between 2 Ariane 4 launches, yes, hat in the air, that's good, is 3 weeks, but the work will start within the hour because the fire brigade will be on the pad but by that time starting to clean up from
Absolutely.
the effects of tonight's liftoff.
Yes. And it's quite possible to prepare an Ariane 4 launcher in the preparation zone while having another Ariane 4 launcher in the launch zone. So we've done our best to optimize the procedures involved in preparing for a launch. But since the launch teams are different for Ariane 5 and Ariane 4, we can actually do 3 campaigns in parallel.
Just for personal pleasure of the 2 gentlemen in the red shirts,
Eh bien,
Philippe Lebouat and Jean-François Valobra.
55e succès consécutif.
This is the 55th success, and I would like to begin by thanking our teams, the teams of CNES and our industries, for their excellent performance. For almost 6 years now, they have been carrying out absolutely perfect work